Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight we slip into the soft pages of a quiet modern book about something we so often wrestle with, and so rarely understand. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. The book is not really about money, it is about us, about the small, often invisible feelings that shape every financial decision we make, about fear, about memory, about story, about what we have come to believe, without ever choosing to. The opening idea is gentle, that doing well with money has very little to do with how smart you are, and almost everything to do with how you behave. This is a hopeful book, because behaviour can be changed, slowly, without force, by understanding first, then by softening. Tonight we'll walk through 9 of these quiet ideas, each one a small candle, none requiring effort, none requiring memory. Let your shoulders soften, let your jaw release. Let the day settle into the floor beneath you. You don't need to follow every word. The mind takes what it needs. The rest drifts gently downstream. Morgan Housel is a writer who spent years watching people make decisions about money. The very rich, the very poor, the wise, the reckless. And he noticed slowly that the patterns had less to do with intelligence, and more to do with the small private worlds we each carry inside us. Tonight, you don't have to think about your money. Tonight you only need to rest. Just listen. Let the chapters arrive. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. The first lesson in this book is one of kindness. Morgan Housel begins with a quiet observation. Each of us carries inside a private map of what money means, and that map was drawn long before we ever held a wallet. Imagine someone born in 1950 in America. Through their 20s and 30s, they watched the stock market rise, steadily. Reliably. They came to believe, without quite realising it, that investing was something safe, something that simply works. Now imagine someone born in 1970 in the same country. They came of age through stagflation, through crashes, through the long, anxious 90s. They came to believe just as deeply that the stock market was a casino, that trusting it was foolish. 2 people, same country, same education, 2 completely different relationships with money. Neither of them is wrong. Each is shaped by a slightly different slice of history. This is the gift of the first chapter, that when someone makes a financial decision that seems, to you, strange, they are not, usually, being foolish. They are more likely listening to a story that began long before you met them, a story written by their parents, by their childhood, by the small economic weather of the place where they grew up. We are all, in our money lives, slightly biased, slightly haunted by what we've seen. There is a softness in this, a permission to stop judging others, and perhaps more importantly, to stop judging yourself. The choices you have made were not crazy. They were yours, shaped by the unique weather of your one life. Tonight you do not need to defend any of those choices. You only need to rest. The map can wait. The map can keep drawing itself. Chapter 2. Luck and Risk. The next idea is gentler still, about how much of life is not, in fact, in our hands. Morgan Housel tells a story about Bill Gates, about how in 1968 Bill was 13 years old, attending one of the only schools in the entire world that had a computer terminal. A wealthy mother had bought it for the school almost on a whim. There were perhaps 300 million high school-aged children alive at that moment, and maybe a few hundred had access to a computer. Bill was one of those few hundred, not because he was smarter, not because he worked harder, but because he happened by simple accident to be in that school in that year. There was another boy in the school, Kent Evans, just as bright, just as obsessed with computers, Bill's closest friend. Kent died, in his teens, in a mountaineering accident. 2 boys, the same gift, the same room, different fates. Morgan Housel does not tell this story to diminish what Bill Gates built. He tells it to remind us that next to every great success, there is a quiet thread of luck, and next to every great failure, a thread of misfortune. This means, gently, that we should be slow to envy. The rich, the famous, the seemingly blessed have almost always been carried part way by something they did not earn, and we should be slower still to judge those who've struggled. Their struggle is not, mostly, a moral failing. It is often the long shadow of a thread of bad luck no one ever saw. So tonight, release the comparing, release the judging, yourself included. The threads of your life are partly your doing and partly the weather. Both can be lived with, kindly. Chapter 3. Never enough. There is a quiet, almost dangerous trap that this book warns about. The trap of never having enough. Morgan Housel tells a story about two writers at a wealthy man's party in the Hamptons, the novelist Joseph Heller and the writer Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut, looking around, says to Heller, "See that hedge fund manager over there? He made more money in a single day than your novel will make in your lifetime." And Heller answers, "Yes, but I have something he will never have." "What's that?" Vonnegut asks. "Enough." Enough. It is a small word, a quiet word, but it carries inside it the answer to one of the deepest dangers of money, the danger of never knowing when to stop. Some of the most spectacular financial disasters in history happened to people who already had everything. They did not need more, but they could not stop, because they had never decided how much was enough. This is perhaps the most important inner question you can ask yourself, quietly, before sleep. What, for me, would be enough? This is perhaps the most important inner question you can ask yourself, quietly, before sleep. What, for me, would be enough? Not what would impress others, not what would make a magazine cover, but what genuinely would let your shoulders drop, would let your jaw soften, would let you sleep without that small, anxious weight at the edge of the day. The figure does not need to be small. It only needs to be real, yours, felt. Once you know that figure, even faintly, you can stop running, you can let the day end, you can let the day sometimes simply be enough. Tonight you have enough. Right now, in this moment, in this rest, you have in fact enough. Chapter 4. Confounding compounding. There is a strange piece of mathematics hidden inside money, so strange that even the brightest minds of our time have struggled to feel it. Albert Einstein is sometimes said to have called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he ever said it or not, the point is true. Time, applied gently to money, can do things that intuition cannot quite grasp. Morgan Housel writes about Warren Buffett, the most famous investor of our age. Buffett's net worth, as the book was written, was around $84 billion. Of that, $81 billion came after his 65th birthday. Read that again, slowly. 81 of his $84 billion came after the age that most of us are thinking about retiring. What this means is that Warren Buffett was not, primarily, the world's greatest stock picker. He was the world's most patient stock picker. He started investing very young. He never stopped. He gave time the chance to do its quiet mathematical work. The lesson of this chapter is not mostly about wealth. It is about patience, about the small daily things we do that, given long enough, become the largest things in our lives. The kindness repeated, the exercise repeated, the kind word repeated, the quiet saving repeated. Time is the most generous force in finance and in life. It rewards those who let it work. So tonight you do not have to do anything dramatic. You do not have to make any large decision. You only have to be patient with yourself, with your slowly becoming self. The compounding is happening, quietly, even now, even tonight. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy. These, Morgan Housel tells us, are two different things, two different skills. To get wealthy, you usually need optimism, risk, belief. You need to put yourself out there, to bet on something, to work hard, to have the courage to try, often, even when no one would blame you for not trying. To stay wealthy, you need almost the opposite. You need humility. You need fear. You need the awareness that what you've earned can be lost in an instant. You need to assume that something, sometime, will go wrong. The same person, the same mind must hold both. The boldness to begin, the caution to keep. This sounds like a contradiction. It is one of those quiet truths that good lives are often built on. You must be brave and fearful, open and protected, willing to risk and unwilling to be careless. The same applies, Morgan Housel suggests, to many things in life. Not just money, relationships, health, reputation, the work of building and the work of keeping. There is a softness in noticing this, a permission to feel both, to not have to choose finally between the bold version of yourself and the careful version. They can both live in you. They can both be true. Tonight you do not have to be either. You do not have to be bold. You do not have to be careful. You only have to rest. The two halves of you can put down their tools. The day's decisions are over. You have done enough boldness today. You have done enough caution. The night does not require either. Chapter 6. The Seduction of Pessimism. There is a strange thing that happens in the mind around the news. Pessimism, Morgan Housel observes, sounds smarter than optimism. The pessimist seems wise, sober, realistic. The optimist seems naive, childish, foolish. But the long history of human progress does not actually support this. If you had bet 50 years ago on pessimism, on the world getting worse, you would have lost almost every wager. Lifespans have lengthened. Child mortality has fallen. Literacy has risen. Most of the slow, quiet trends of human life have moved upward. This does not mean optimism is always correct. It means only that pessimism is louder, more dramatic, more easily noticed, while the slow, quiet good moves softly in the background, unreported. There is a related insight inside this chapter. Bad news, Morgan Housel says, tends to happen quickly. Good news tends to happen slowly. Market crash takes a day. Market recovery takes years. A relationship can end in an evening. Friendship grows over a decade. We notice the fast things. The slow things we underestimate. So tonight, when your mind reaches gently for worry, for the dark headlines, for the pessimistic story of how things are going, let it. But also notice, quietly, the slow good underneath, the friendships growing, the skills accumulating, the kindness somewhere in the world being practiced by someone you will never meet. Most of life, in fact, is the slow good, quiet, unseen, always there, working in your favour. Tonight, you're part of that slow good, right now, just by resting kindly, just by being enough. Chapter 7. Freedom, the highest dividend. Morgan Housel offers here what is perhaps the deepest idea in the book. The highest form of wealth, he says, is not a yacht, not a house, not a number on a screen. It is the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. That ability, he says, is the highest dividend money can pay. A psychologist named Angus Campbell spent his career trying to understand what makes people happy. He concluded in the end that the strongest predictor of happiness was not income, or status, or marriage, or even good health. It was the feeling of having control over one's own life, a sense of agency, the ability to choose, the ability to say, no, thank you, to say, yes, to say, not today. This is what money at its best can buy. Not things, not luxury, but hours, mornings, weekends. The slow Sunday breakfast that no one is rushing through. The walk to nowhere in particular. The afternoon spent reading, with no clock pressing. This reframes the whole, sometimes anxious, project of saving. We are not mostly saving for a thing. We are saving for a feeling. The feeling of being in charge of our own time. Tonight you have this dividend. You have it freely in the rest you are giving yourself. No one is asking you to do anything in this hour. The hour is yours, the breath is yours, the slow softening of the body is yours. This is, in itself, a kind of wealth. The freedom of one quiet hour, may you receive it kindly. Chapter 8. The Man in the Car Paradox. There is a quiet, almost humorous observation in this book, about why we work so hard for the things we work hard for. Morgan Housel writes about a man in his early 20s working as a valet at a fancy hotel. Wealthy guests would arrive in expensive sports cars, the kind that, growing up, he'd stared at in magazines. He would watch them step out, hand him the keys, and walk inside. And he noticed slowly something strange. He had not in any of these moments looked at the driver. He had only looked at the car, imagining himself, one day, owning that car, imagining the admiration he would feel from the people around him. But he, the valet, had not given any admiration to the driver. The driver was, for him, almost invisible. The car was everything. This is, Morgan Housel says, the paradox. We buy expensive things, partly, to be admired, but the people we hope will admire us are not actually looking at us. They are looking at the thing and imagining themselves with it. The admiration we are reaching for does not exist, not in the way we hoped. This is perhaps painful to read, but it is also a kind of gift, because if no one is really watching, if the audience we've been performing for is largely imaginary, we are free to buy what we actually want, to live as we actually wish, to stop gently performing for an audience that was never there, Tonight, no one is watching. No one is judging. There is no audience. There is only your one quiet life, settling softly into rest. Chapter 9, Save. The final lesson of this book is perhaps the simplest and the most overlooked. Save. That is the lesson. Just save. Morgan Housel makes a small, quiet point that other money books rarely emphasise. You don't need a reason to save. You don't need a goal. You don't need a plan. You don't need to be saving for something. Just save. Most personal finance writing assumes that savings need a destination. A house, a retirement, a big trip. And those things are good. But Morgan Housel suggests something gentler, that savings, by themselves, with no specific purpose, are still valuable. Because life is uncertain. Because something will happen that you did not plan for. Because one day, an opportunity will arise that you would not have been able to take without the savings. Because one day, an emergency will come that you would not have been able to weather. Savings, in this view, are not for a goal. They are for the unexpected. They are for the future you cannot yet see. They are for flexibility itself. This reframes saving as a kind of quiet love letter to your future self, who may need it, who may one day look back and feel small gratitude that you tonight chose a slightly smaller something now, so that they could have a slightly larger choice later. You don't need to save much, just consistently, just patiently, just gently. Tonight you do not have to save anything. The day's work is done. But tomorrow, perhaps, in some small way, you will. And that small choice will be quietly a kindness across the years. Let yourself rest now. The lessons will hold themselves, the book will keep itself, your future self will keep itself. None of them this evening require anything of you other than rest. Let your shoulders drop, let your hands lie open, let the day go out through the soles of your feet and into the floor and away. There is one final image that Morgan Housel leaves the reader with. That money, at its best, is a tool of patience, of kindness, of quiet, slow becoming, not a measure of worth, not a scoreboard, not a story to tell others, just patience, just kindness, just time. You have all three tonight, the patience to rest, the kindness to be soft with yourself, the time in this hour to let the day end. You're not behind, you're not too late. The library has been waiting for you, and the library will keep waiting. You have done enough today. You have done enough. Good night from the Midnight Library. Sleep well.